a little bit this afternoon. We badly needed rain, and so, but Saturday, according to long-term forecast, is 84, 85 degrees and sunny. So I think our induction will enjoy good weather for that anyway.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. And the forecast I've seen as well shows that we have some nice weather here the next few days. So hopefully that will bode well for our induction that we have planned. And we do have quite a few people on at this point, so we won't belabor the point any further. The reason we've called you all here today is Midge and I have been working very hard here through the summer on a number of things, but the big thing is the event of the season this coming Saturday. I'll hand it over to you, Midge, and tell them what's going on this coming Saturday.
Yes, this Saturday, 1:30, we're going to have a induction ceremony for 5 more snowmobile pioneers of Eastern racing. And so, and Mike is helping us. He's helped us all season on this. And so I think that most everybody is going to be able to make it. But it's at Cranes Snowmobile Museum here in Lancaster. It's a free deal. There's no charge. If you'd like to leave a donation in the donation bucket, we certainly would appreciate it. But it's there's no charge. There never has been a charge. Come and enjoy the day. Bring a chair. Bring sunglasses. Probably wear a hat. Just back, and many of these people you probably knew when you were growing up watching snowmobile racing here in the East. We've got Bruce Dunham is coming. Calvin Reynolds is coming. And I did Bill Abold and his wife are coming again, Kathy. So they were inducted last year. He was the head of Team Abold in New York, the winningest snowmobile racing team in the history of Eastern racing. Yeah, and Bob Martin's going to be there, I believe.
Paul Lamontagne usually makes
former inductees, Herb Yancey. Yeah. So please come out, and you can visit with these people before and after the event. They'll probably hang around for a little while, and you can go into the museum and check out Paul Crane's beautiful museum and all of his snowmobiles in there, and look at our Hall of Fame wall and check out who we have invited in the past, and that's going to be a good day.
Cranes Snowmobile Museum, over 100 vintage snowmobiles in there. And as he mentioned too, the ceremony itself begins at 1:30, but I encourage people to get there no later than 1, because you're going to bring your own lawn chairs. You want to have a little time to set those up. And then also, like he said, you want some time to go into the museum. There's over 100 sleds in Cranes Snowmobile Museum. So you want to make the time to be able to take your time inside there and look at all of those snowmobiles. Then, of course, we all sit down at 1:30 and the ceremony begins. We're going to induct 5 more racers into the Eastern Snowmobile Racing Hall of Fame. And this is the sixth annual Eastern Snowmobile Racing Hall of Fame induction ceremony. So this is something that's got momentum now. It's on the map. People know about it. People come from all around to this, and it's a thing now.
It is. It's big. Yes, it's something that Paul Crane and I came up with back in 2016, actually, and then our first induction was in 2017, and we thought it was time, and long since time, that we recognize these people that raced back then. They were basically our heroes, Mike's and mine. We grew up reading about these people in magazines and in newspapers, and we went out to the racetracks here in Lancaster. We had the Grand Prix. They raced in Bangor. They raced England, in New York, and then it stopped around the early 80s. And everybody went back to their day jobs, and these people went back to their day jobs and brought up families. And they thought that we forgot that era, basically. They thought that we had forgotten them, and they found out that we have not forgotten them.
Mm.
And so we have inducted them into the Eastern Snowmobile Racing Hall of Fame, and we will continue to do so as long as there's folks out there that are the top racers that need to be there. We will try to make it happen. So
Yes. And it's
yeah,
a reunion type of situation because each year, people who have already been inducted over previous years, they come to the event just because it's a reunion kind of a situation. So if you have wonderful memories
absolutely.
of snowmobiling from back in the day, snowmobile racing from back in the day, and if you remember all of those names, many of those people are going to be there on Saturday, and you can mix and mingle with them, hang
Mhm.
out with them, visit with them, get your photo taken with them. It's just a wonderful opportunity. If you enjoy vintage snowmobiles and have wonderful memories of racing back in the day, in the glory days of the early 70s, um, this is where we celebrate all of that. We embrace all of that and remember all that. And it's just a wonderful experience. I
Yeah,
mean, the ceremony is wonderful and everything, but the hanging out before and after with all of these people who were part of that, it's very approachable. It's not a big formal event. Everyone's just kind of mixing and mingling and walking around, and you can approach anyone you'd like to walk up to them and say hello. You know, I remember you from back in the day. Can we do a photograph? Everyone's very approachable.
yes, and you hit it too, Mike. It is like a family reunion.
Yes.
These guys used to try to beat each other up out on the racetrack every weekend for 10, 15 years here in New England, and they knew everyone. They raced against each one, and after the racing was with, they'd go back to the motels and go back to the bars. And I often said they raced handlebar to handlebar all afternoon, drank elbow to elbow at night. So
Yes.
they're just a bunch of young kids. They were in their 20s or in their 30s, and they were and know that era is probably some of the best times in their lives, and
Oh,
they
for
made
sure.
some money at it too.
Yeah.
They really they were with the contingency money from spark plug companies and drive belt companies and snowmobile manufacturers kicking in a bunch of money. These
Mm.
people would, if they were decent drivers and they won, a lot of races during the year, they could probably make $3,000-4,000 in their pocket. And we're talking back in the 1970s. That was a
That's good
lot of
money
money
back
back
then.
then.
For sure. For
So
sure.
yeah,
Yeah. It was a
yeah,
good time for everyone.
there. Some of them were coming home with $1,000 in their pocket over just win a couple of races over the weekend. It was big time, man. It was really
Oh, yeah.
big time. These
Especially if you're in
guys,
your
their
20s
name
and
was
30s.
out there and all. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, you're
They
living a
were
rock
just
star
they were
lifestyle
just
in a
kids.
way, you know? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I've said this before. I grew up, but Carl Yastrzemski, was a big hero of mine, sports hero. And, guys like Richard Petty, things like that. But, they never came to Lancaster. They
True.
never, Bobby Orr never came to Lancaster. But you
Yeah.
know what? Calvin Reynolds came to Lancaster.
Yeah.
And, Bob Fortin lived in Lancaster.
Yeah.
And, Conrad Rollins came to life. If you're a Polaris guy, there was no
Yeah.
bigger name than Conrad Rollins in New England. He's probably the greatest Polaris racer there was out here from
Yes.
Maine. So, and it was in that DVD that Mike and I put together that we got was the 71. There's some eye candy there. If you're an Arctic Cat fan, if you're a Polaris fan, a Do fan, you're going to see some 4-cylinder King Cats, Blizzards, yeah, Polaris Starfire when they were brand new. The things were only
Yeah.
like 3 or 4 months old. I even said
Fresh
that in
out
the
of the
DVD
crate.
more than once. I mean, but this DVD we're putting together is something to have. Really is.
For sure. In fact, let's take a deep dive on that. So several months ago, Midge approached me saying that his cousin had shared with him some old 8mm movies from back in the day. Lancaster in 1971, Malone, New York in 1973. And he said, well, what can we do with this to try to put it into a presentation that we can all enjoy? So we talked back and forth on it, and we decided, well, let's use this as a fundraiser for the Eastern Snowmobile Racing Hall of Fame, Cranes Snowmobile Museum, and the Vintage Snowmobile Podcast. And we've also got support from the Lancaster Motel. So what we did is we took this footage, and we both looked at it and tried to figure out all of the people in there that we could identify and anything that could be interesting to talk about. And then we just sat there in a format like we're doing now, and we just rolled it, and we would talk about it, and we would pause it for a few minutes, and well, we recognize this guy, we recognize her, we recognize him, and whatever backstory we could think of about each of these people, and some of the sleds and some of the circumstances and just everything around the racing scene in the early 70s. And we had a wonderful time doing it. And it went almost 2.5 hours, this video that we made into a DVD. And the DVD is ready. So if anyone is interested in purchasing this DVD, it's almost 2.5 hours of vintage racing footage from the early 70s, along with all sort of commentary and history and detail about it. And it's only, let me put up the graphic. Where'd that graphic go? Right here. So this first item on this graphic is that DVD, over 2 hours of vintage snowmobile programming. It's only $15 for the DVD, and of course the postal service needs to get their cut, so it's $20. But that $15 is divided equally between the Eastern Snowmobile Racing Hall of Fame, Cranes Snowmobile Museum, and the Vintage Snowmobile Podcast. So we're using this as a fundraiser. We're hoping that it provides something that's very much of value to people who have good memories of racing and vintage snowmobiles back in the day, and it also helps us to maintain what we're doing with the Hall of Fame, the Cranes Museum, and the Vintage Snowmobile Podcast. Anything you'd like to add to that, or anything I've missed?
Yeah, Mike. The thing too, Mike has slowed this film down so that you can actually see the sleds. I don't know if you people are familiar with 8mm, but it's like watching the Keystone Cops. You know, they're faster than a normal speed of what they would normally be. Now those sleds are probably zipping a good 80 miles an hour straightaways, and with the 8mm, you couldn't. All you saw was a blur. Mike has slowed this whole thing down, and you can actually see the sleds go by. You can actually see the numbers on the sleds. You can pretty much tell who was driving them, and did a beautiful job setting this thing up. And then there's a few replays that we would be talking about, like for instance, that famous Enfiran wreck that Bruce Dunham did at Grand Prix in the 800 class, where he come down out of number 4, and the right front ski leg broke off. The ski went flying, and the sled dug into the snow, and it did an end-for-end flip right there in front of the main grandstand. And that was a talk over event for years afterwards, you know, because Bruce Dunham was actually going for his 3rd win in a row and able to take home that Kilkenny Cup. He was going for that Kilkenny Cup in this event, and he did that end for end. And it just we just caught the tail of that wreck, and and Mike replayed it 2 or 3 times, you know, so you can actually see the whole thing happen. And
we slowed it down frame by frame also, so you can get a close look at it.
Yes. Oh, he did a beautiful job, Mike. It's he worked this thing for at least a solid month, I think, off and on, didn't you, Mike? Really?
Yeah, we've been working on this most of the summer.
Beautiful piece of work, really it is.
Yeah,
you guys, anybody that gets this DVD would really enjoy it.
Yeah, for sure. If you have wonderful memories of vintage snowmobiles, and especially of racing back in the early 70s, the glory days, the golden age of racing,
and this was
it's a time capsule. Yes, this is the high water mark of snowmobile racing.
Yes,
for sure.
Yes, I think everybody will agree that the early 70s, early to mid 70s was the meat of the era. Yeah. This is when, I mean, you're going to see the crowds. There was 15 to 20,000 people there at Lancaster. You know, this is a town of 3,500. And I can remember one time, Bob Clark, who was working at the Grand Prix at the time, Team Arctic was supposed to show up. They wanted to get the races going about 8 o'clock in the morning. I think this was like 1970, 71. It might have been even talking about the race that you'll see on the DVD. They were looking for Team Arctic. It wasn't showing up. So they got on the CB radio and they got a hold of the driver and he says, "Where are you?" And he says, "I'm stuck." He said, they said, "Stuck? Stuck where?" He said, "I'm stuck down here at the intersection at the head of Main Street." He said, "The traffic is backed up all the way down Main Street and they're not letting me in." So they actually had to dispatch a state cruiser to escort Team Arctic up the left-hand side of the road all the way to the fairgrounds to let them in so they could start racing. It was crazy, and you're going to see this.
Story.
And
yes, you see the Team Arctic trailer.
An exciting time.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that it's 8mm footage, which what people were using back in the day, gives it a sense of authenticity. This is the real deal. It's rough around the edges and everything, but this is the real thing. This is not a recreation or anything like this. It's actual footage that was taken in 71 and 73 at actual races at the heyday and the glory days of racing.
Yeah.
And I'll pop the graphic on the screen.
Andy
Go ahead.
Buto did it. Yeah. Just going to say, my cousin Andy Buto is the person that had the 8mm camera, and I think he took like 5 rolls of film for the Grand Prix and maybe 3 rolls for the 1973 World Series at Malone. Yep. You're not going to see a lot of vintage racing at Malone because it rained a lot, but you're going to see how bad the track was. There was a bad wreck right in front of us. A bunch of people jumped over the wall and helped the guy, and that was something to watch. And so you're going to see the Polaris factory trailer was there, and but this whole thing is something that I think anybody that's involved in that era, remember that era when they were kids, it's going to bring a lot of memories back, and I think it's really something that people would enjoy.
Yeah, and there's over 2 hours worth of that. And I'm going to pop the graphic back on the screen. Item number 1 in the blue lettering there, that's the DVD we've been talking about, the Eastern Snowmobile Racing Time Capsule DVD. Over 2 hours worth of vintage snowmobile programming. It's only $15 plus $5 to ship it, so it's only $20. There also is information in the description as far as to order. We're trying to set up to be able to take credit cards, but that's taking a little longer than we'd like. So in the meantime, if you want to order one, reserve one, you can mail a check or a money order to the address on the screen, and we'll get one right out to you. They are ready. We've got 50 of them ready, and they'll first come, first serve. And then we've got another DVD to tell you about as well. It's actually a DVD set. Let me pop that graphic back on the screen. A moment ago, we were just mentioning this upcoming induction ceremony for the Eastern Snowmobile Racing Hall of Fame. This is going to be the 6th annual induction ceremony for the Eastern Snowmobile Racing Hall of Fame. And we've been able to get each and every one on video and on DVD, and we're going to be filming this one as well. So once we're finished editing this latest ceremony that's going to happen Saturday, we're going to put all 6 of these into a 6 DVD set that you can purchase to have as a souvenir and to refer to and to remember all of this. It's $60 plus $5 for postage, total of $65. And that's going to need a little editing for this latest edition, but I plan to ship that by October 31st, by Halloween. And again, if you'd like to order that, just take a look there at the bottom of the screen. There's the address of where to send a check or a money order, and we'll get that right out to you once it's ready. We hope for that to be ready by Halloween. And anything to add to that, or?
Yeah, these videos that we took when we inducted these people, you're going to see how emotional that they got for being inducted into the Hall of Fame. It's a lifelong dream, really, for anybody that spent 10 to 15 years of their life working all summer on a snowmobile, on a race sled, and getting it ready for the racing, for the next winter, and then racing every single weekend, and then going back and working on that sled all week so that it would be ready for the following weekend. And they did that year after year for 10, 15 years. And then it was over. And they went back to their day jobs, as I said before, brought up families. And they had this in their memory of things that they did, and they thought that people forgot about it. Well, guess what? We didn't forget about it. And now they're in the Hall of Fame. And they got emotional, and I get emotional.
Yeah, me too.
Because it's something that's near and dear to us up here in the North Country. What else did we do in the time? Think about it.
Yeah.
There was nothing before snowmobile racing in these little quiet, sleepy northern towns other than stay home and watch television.
Yeah.
You got out and maybe you got on a sled, you slid downhill, or you skied or something maybe. But there's something, folks, when you see sleds running down these fairground racetracks at 85, 90 miles an hour, handlebar to handlebar, if you're at Lancaster in 1969 and you saw Claude Hebert on his 634 motor ski cut a telephone pole off, let me tell you something. You got your money's worth.
Yes. And the induction, when he was inducted, the year we inducted him, he told the story of that. So the whole audience and everyone watching the video is able to experience that story. And it's a great story the way he told it.
Yeah.
And we also have interviews with all of these inductees. These DVDs we have interviews with as many of them as we could catch for an interview. So it's not just the ceremony. There's interviews and there's bonus footage on these DVDs. So when you're getting the 6 DVD set, you're getting many, many hours of vintage snowmobile programming.
Absolutely.
And like Midge said, it felt to a lot of people like this was all forgotten. But as it turns out, both with the induction ceremony for the Hall of Fame going 6 years and with me doing the podcast, and we're seeing more and more vintage snowmobile shows pop up and racing is alive once again. Turns out that was not forgotten. Once that got in motion, it's snowballed, because the Hall of Fame is snowballing. What I'm doing with the podcast is snowballing, and we're seeing more and more vintage snowmobile shows pop up. I believe there's a snowball effect there too, and pardon the pun with a snowball, but it is what it is. It turns out that is not forgotten.
And another thing.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Mike.
No, that's all right. I was going to make a point, but it escaped me. I'll think of it. Go ahead and make your point.
Well, I was going to say that, with these Hall of Fames, these people have now connected with one another again. They haven't seen each for 40 or 50 years. And to bring them together once a year like this, it's like we said before, it's like a reunion. It's like a family reunion.
It is. It's a community.
These guys raced hard against one another for 10 or 15 years. And even though they were trying to beat the pants off of each other, there was a lot of friends involved in this and camaraderie. And, so bringing these people together, and it gives them a whole new outlook, really. It brings out the smiles, and it's the good stuff. It really is. It's the stuff that they did when they were kids.
For sure.
Yeah.
And to add to that, I just remembered and I just remembered my point. The other thing that's kind of a side effect from this that no one had anticipated is that there's a whole younger generation that's saying, wait a minute, something's going on here. There's something happened, and there's still a way to connect with that. And they're very curious about it and interested in it. There's a whole younger generation that's checking this out. And I dare say that the vintage snowmobile hobby is in good hands as far as keeping it alive, because another 20, 30 years, people like you and I are no longer going to be around, but I'm confident that they are going to carry it forward and do something interesting with it.
Right. Yeah. And it's nice too, especially with this DVD set, you can play this years in the future to your grandkids and say, I saw that guy race, And he may not, he may no longer be with us. You know, like Mike said, we're probably all going to be gone here at some point, and especially there's a lot less in front of us than there is behind us.
Yeah.
And these things are going to be worth keeping future generations to be, when your grandkids can actually watch these. And you know, I'll tell you what, everybody that's racing today, they're standing on these guys' shoulders.
Yes.
These are the guys that started racing 7-horsepower Kohler engines.
Yeah.
In the early 60s, and ended up racing 100+ horsepower, 100-mile-an-hour IFS sleds.
Yeah.
They saw it all. They
These are the
tin
pioneers.
cabs, you know, to racing, you know, Kevlar cab cowl snowmobiles.
Sure.
They're the ones that they were the innovators.
Sure.
So
and
they're still with us. The thing is, they're still with us, and why you know, give up the opportunity to be able to see these people while they're still here?
Yes. And a moment ago, I referred to them as pioneers of the sport, and I'm going to go a little further with that metaphor. When you think about pioneers, you think, you know, clearing the land and putting up the cabin and, you know, livestock and all of this. In a very real sense, these were the people that broke that ground for the people who are racing today. They put up the, you know, metaphorical
Absolutely,
cabins, Mike, and cleared the metaphorical trees, you know, to make that happen.
Yeah.
And we're able to see them on this DVD.
You know, even the 2-cycle engines. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, even the 2-cycle engines started out as water pump engines. Generator engines from Austria and Germany. That's what those engines were designed for, was basically water pumps in generator for, you know, power plants, small engines. And these guys took these 2-stroke engines, and they were doing things with them that even these engine companies didn't think was possible. They're porting them and putting bigger carburetors on them and tuned pipes, and all of a sudden now this little 40-mile-an-hour snowmobile is doing 65. You know,
yeah.
So
and adding extra cylinders to them.
Yeah. Well, you know, like you'll see on 71 Grand Prix film, they had 4. You know, 4 cylinders on these kits. They only had it once. They did it in 71. They had a 4-cylinder King Cat, and you're going to see a bunch of them. It's eye candy for any of the Attic Cat people. Yeah,
for sure. And the time capsule DVD has a good look at that. And I'm going to pause for a moment.
Yeah.
We've got a comment coming in. We've got Michael Whitcup saying hello to both of us, and hello back to Michael.
Hi, Michael.
Yeah. Cool deal. Yeah. Thank you so much for being on. But in case you're just joining us, we're here talking about this event that's coming up this weekend. It's the 6th annual induction ceremony for the Eastern Snowmobile Racing Hall of Fame, coming up this Saturday, September 10th, 1 p.m. at Cranes Snowmobile Museum, 172 Main Street in Lancaster, New Hampshire. Now, the ceremony begins at 1:30, but we encourage you to arrive no later than 1 p.m. because you're bringing lawn chairs. You're going to stake out a spot for your lawn chairs. Then you want to allow some time to go in, look around at Cranes Snowmobile Museum. I've got a graphic for that as well. Here's the graphic for Cranes Snowmobile Museum. There's over 100 vintage snowmobiles in there. So you want to make sure you're allowing yourself time to go in there and look around and take the time you need to check out all of those sleds, and then come back out for 1:30 as the ceremony begins.
Right. Yeah. There's plenty of room too on the lawn. How the lawn is set up out in front of the museum, it's on a gradual slope, and we set up our chairs and things for the inductees down on the low side, down in the driveway area, so that you're sitting on a gradual slope, so you're really not interfering with anyone else as far as visibility. You're always going to be able to have a good shot of seeing what's going on. So it's
a
an excellent
like an
spot
amphitheater
for an outside ceremony.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So it's an excellent spot, and we have a sound system So you're going to be able to hear everything they're saying, and nobody's got to be yelling or anything like that. So it's pretty well set up. And Greg Allen brings up his beautiful big canopy and his black and white checkered flooring. There really adds to it, doesn't it, Mike? That
It does. It looks
canopy
really nice.
that Greg brings every year.
It gives a
the
great racing
inductees are
vibe
sitting
to it.
underneath this canopy. Yeah,
Yes.
so they're in the shade. We're not in the shade, but they're in the shade. So
sure.
Yeah.
And if you're listening to this and you're thinking, well, God, that's just too far for me to drive, not to worry. We're going to be doing a live podcast of this induction ceremony. So wherever you're viewing this now, tune in at 1:30 p.m. Eastern time, and you can watch the ceremony live. I'm going to podcast it to 8 different places on Facebook and YouTube. So wherever you're viewing us now, just come on back at 1:30 p.m. Eastern time Saturday, and you can watch the whole ceremony. Right.
Thanks
on your computer
Mike.
or your cell phone. Yes. Sure. And even if you're there in person and you want to have it on your cell phone while you're like this and you're watching the event and watching your phone, that's certainly an option. You know, it can be kind of fun. A lot of people do that at sport events and races and so forth. And it's certainly an option here
This
as well.
stuff is all above my pay grade.
Sure. But
this is Mike Lapierre's magic, if you will.
Sure. Yeah, I've been doing these podcasts now for several years, and it turns out there's a lot of different ways that we can use this for mutual benefit and for people to be able to enjoy things. It's turned into a great thing, and that's one of the things we're looking forward to. Go ahead.
Yeah, we have a gentleman coming up from Florida.
Yes.
And you know how planes are today. You know, they're delayed all the time, and so it all boils down to whether his plane is going to be able to make it or not. If it doesn't, Mike has figured out a way so that he can actually speak on his behalf when we induct him with his voice over the loudspeakers, so people could actually hear him. So there's a way that this gentleman can you know, say his speech if he wants to without actually being there. But we really sincerely hope he does come.
Definitely. We hope he does. But we're working on a plan B. In fact, when you and I are finished with this podcast, I'm going to call him and we're going to work those details out. But yeah, we'll be able to bring him on the podcast to make his to receive his award and make his speech. We'll put a microphone up to my cell phone so that that we can hear that. And then in editing, when we make the DVD, I'll take what we've done on the podcast where we've got his face and him accepting his award, and I'll just edit that all in for a final presentation. It'll look a little different in that spot, but at least we'll have his face. We'll be able to see him making his speech.
Yeah. It's I'll tell you what, for this old guy here, we are, all of us here at the Hall of Fame, so glad that Mike Lapierre came into RAS back in 2018 and asked me if he could video the Hall of Fame and do some interviews. And I said, sure. And it's been a great fit for the last 6 years. Mike has worked very hard for this organization. And I can't say enough good things about Mike Lapierre. So let me tell you folks right now, I'm not a salesman, but if whatever Mike is selling on his podcast, really think strongly of purchasing that or whatever it is, because he works very hard at doing a lot of stuff for a lot of people for free.
Yeah. And I appreciate the kind words and the encouragement like that. Yeah, I appreciate that. And I have to send some words your way as well, because this has been a wonderful collaboration between my podcast activities and the Eastern Snowmobile Racing Hall of Fame. We're a perfect fit for each other, because for me, it's great content. For you guys, it's great publicity. It's been a wonderful collaboration, and we're able to capture and preserve and embrace and celebrate a lot of the history of snowmobile racing. There's a lot of history in Lancaster that we've been able to put on film and put into a story for people to enjoy. It's just been a wonderful collaboration. And of course, over the last 4 or 5 years of doing this, we've become really good friends. And that's just icing on the cake.
Very good
You
friend.
can't ask for better than that, you know. It's just a great
No.
situation from every
You know,
angle.
like the old saying says, one hand washes the other.
For sure. For sure. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
been a wonderful collaboration. And
And
sometimes
a
I
good
like to joke.
collaboration, Mike.
Yes,
Yeah.
and sometimes I like to
And
joke
he's
that
an
where
Arctic
there's
Cat fan.
yeah, I like to
I was
joke
gonna
that
say, you're an Arctic Cat fan, and I'm a
yes.
Polaris fan, and those two factories are only 20 miles apart.
It's true.
So, you know, they were brothers, right? The Arctic
Yes.
Cat guy and the Polaris guy were brothers. So, you know, any closer.
Yeah, it's a lot of it's an analogy there for sure. And the other thing I like to joke
Yeah.
about is that you and I are the Lennon and McCartney of the vintage snowmobile space. You know, as far as collaborating, because Lennon and McCartney were great collaborators. The what's the word I'm looking for? They're the body of work. There's a I'm drawing a blank. The sum was greater than the parts, is what I'm trying to say. With Lennon and McCartney, when they collaborated,
Yeah.
the sum was
Yeah.
greater than the parts. And in many cases, with you and I collaborating,
Yeah.
the sum is greater than the parts. It's much more than either of us could do on
Yeah.
our own. And combining, you know, one and one
Yeah.
doesn't
Oh,
always
yeah.
make two. One and one with a good collaboration can make 10.
Yeah.
You know, it's a good
Yeah.
collaboration. You
Yeah.
can really leverage your activities and everything.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's and you know, we got to put Paul Crane in the mix too.
Yes,
If it wasn't for Paul, we wouldn't have a home for this.
for sure.
Paul stepped to the plate big time, and he opens up his museum to the Snowmobile Hall of Fame. And there's I can't say good about. You know, everything Paul has done for this whole thing has been fantastic.
For sure. For sure. And then some other good friends who are also a big part of this. I'm going to pop them on the screen as well as our dear friends at the Lancaster Motel.
Yes.
Yeah, they host an
Absolutely.
after party
Brian
for
and
this
Ruby
every year.
Berryman.
Yes,
Yes.
and yeah, this is the other thing. There's a lot of history there as well at the Lancaster Motel. The award ceremony for the racing for the Lancaster Grand Prix used to take place at the Lancaster Motel. So there's a lot of history there. And a lot of those racers, a lot of those big name racers
Absolutely.
like Bob Eastman and Gilles Villeneuve, they all stayed at the Lancaster Motel. So the Lancaster Motel is very much
That's
a part of
absolutely.
that history. Yeah, for sure. And
Yeah.
for those who are thinking about coming to this event either this year or next year, this is the place to stay. It's just a short walk from the ceremony and Cranes Snowmobile Museum. And if you're thinking about doing some trail riding in the winter, they're right on the trail. You literally park your sleds a few feet from the trail and you're there right from your door. And you're able to go on those legacy trails. The trails in Lancaster or well, let me rephrase that. Lancaster is home to the first snowmobile club in America, the first organized snowmobile club, and you're still able to ride most of those legacy trails that were created back in the early 60s, right out the door from our friends at the Lancaster Motel. And you can combine a snowmobile vacation with just a few steps away going to the Cranes Snowmobile Museum. So you can combine history on the legacy trails and going to the Cranes Snowmobile Museum, all as part of a snowmobile vacation. What other communities or towns or attractions can offer you that kind of a combination? If you're interested in history, there's no better combination that I can think of.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. Yeah. Mike and I took some photos of the Lancaster Motel in reference to the garage where the first Bombardier Skidoo came into the United States.
Yes.
Timberland Machines, when they first came to Lancaster in 1958, bought the old Sherman Motors building. They sold Dodge and Plymouth out of there, and it's an auto dealership, and then they closed up. So Bob Bottoms was the manager of Timberlands. Timber Machines out of Ontario purchased the building, and it's what, Mike? Probably no more than 100 feet behind the Lancaster Motel where that old building was.
The stone's throw.
You know, so the history of the two buildings and for the Bombardier Skidoo, the Lancaster Motel was the headquarters for the Lancaster Grand Prix. It's where everybody stayed. Twist out the trophies. So the Lancaster Motel played a huge role. And it also was, for a long, long time, where the Snowdrifters meetings were. They didn't have a clubhouse for many, many years. So they used that upstairs facility over the motel for their meetings.
Yeah.
So it was, it's Lancaster Motel is a lot of history.
Yeah, they're deeply entrenched in the history of the snowmobile. It all began in the U.S. right behind the motel, and they still, to this day, even though it's new owners, they understand that history and that connection to the history of the snowmobile, and they're very much interested in preserving that, keeping that alive, and they contribute to what we're doing. They do everything they can to help us do our projects. They've made their lobby available to us to do interviews and recordings. They're just completely committed to snowmobiling, vintage and modern. It's just really impressive what they're doing. And didn't they just recently have a mural put on the side of the motel, and part of that is a depiction of the first snowmobile?
Yes, it's a mural of many of the older buildings in town and businesses. And Ruby Berryman was adamant that they put a Bombardier Skidoo on the side of that building as part of the Lancaster's heritage. And because it was Lancaster, New Hampshire is the first place that saw the Bombardier Skidoo in 1959.
Yeah, first one came through.
A lot of people might not know that. They should. But so they painted this Bombardier Skidoo on the side of the motel. It's like a 63 or 64 Skidoo bubble cab. And they failed to put the Bombardier logo on the cab. So I immediately copied off a couple of photos of the old Skidoos and a photo of the logo that they on the cabs, and I gave it to Ruby and told her that please have those guys before they leave to put the Bombardier name on that cab, on that Skidoo, because it's important that people know that this is where the Skidoo originated, was the birthplace of the Skidoo in America. Well, they left without doing it.
Oh no! Wow.
They did. They left without doing it, and it's going to cost about $1,000 to get them back to get it done.
Wow. We'll have to figure something out, I guess.
So
maybe there's another artist that can kind of just touch it in or something.
Well, I touched on that point with Ruby, and she said that artists are very touchy about other people seeing their work.
Yes, they don't
like people dabbling with their artwork.
Yeah.
So it's probably going to have to be them. Well, the guy that did it, he's probably going to have to come back. I did reach out to Bombardier, and they're not in good shape right now because their computer's been down for a while. They got hacked. So they're not in good financial shape right now. Otherwise, I might be able to kick in $1,000 to have that logo put on there the way it should be. So I told Lisa up at Dalton Mountain, she sells Skidoo, and so I told her when the time is right, I said, please don't forget us. I said maybe that at some point they'll help us out to put that name on there. And it's
good idea.
Them
that could be a way that could be a way to raise the money for that. Now we do have some comments coming in. I'd like to read them because some of them are real interesting. Let's see. We've got Alan Gove talking about Cranes. He said he enjoyed visiting that place. He has his folks' first snowmobile. They still have it, and he has his first in storage, both a 1970 Arctic Cat Panther, 303 Wankel, and a original 340 Sox SS that he used to race. Very, very cool, and I appreciate you sharing that with us, Alan.
Very nice.
Yeah. And then we've got regular viewers. Bombard, Floyd, and Lisa, who I had.
Hi, guys.
I had a privilege and a genuine pleasure to meet them at the show in Old Forge, New York, the VSCA show over the summer. Wonderful to meet those guys. Had a chance for a photo opportunity. I don't think I'd have the image loaded, otherwise I'd pop it on the screen because it was great to meet them. They also have a question though, and I'd like to get an answer to this myself. I know we've talked about this in the past, but I don't know if there's anything that's developed. Wondering if there are records of which room Gilles Villeneuve stayed in, and we're also thinking Bob Eastman too. What room that they might have stayed in? Have we had anything on that? Any developments with that?
I had asked Ruby, I believe, a while ago about that, and so I don't think that the old records are available. I think they might have gotten destroyed because we're talking 50 years ago, and pretty close. So I think last time he came was in 76. So yeah, 46 years ago. And so they pretty much got destroyed. They just, but it would be nice to know which we stayed in, and Bob Eastman and Larry Coltham from Arctic Cat. They all stayed here.
Yeah. And it would be neat to be able to say, I'd like to stay in the room that the Bob Eastman stayed in, or Gilles Villeneuve, or Larry. It'd be amazing to be able to stay in the room that that they stayed in. That would be absolutely amazing.
Yeah. And so they could, I'll tell you what, Ruby would in a heartbeat put up their photo in that room.
Yeah, for sure.
That was the room they stayed in. I guarantee Ruby would get a photo of them and say, this is the Bob Eastman room. Well, this is the Gilles Villeneuve room. That's what she's just all over this stuff.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Yeah, they really understand snowmobiles and snowmobiling, and they love the history of it. They embrace it, and they're celebrating it, trying to move it forward. And they do everything they can to support and encourage what you and I are doing as far as keeping the history alive and promoting it and everything. Yeah, it's really nice. And then I guess the other thing, we haven't mentioned this in a little while, so in case people are just joining us, we've been talking about the Eastern Snowmobile Racing Hall of Fame. Just going to touch on this real quick. We're here to promote the induction ceremony that's coming up this Saturday, and we've got a graphic on the screen for that. We've been talking about that for a while, but the other thing that we're here to talk about is a fundraising activity. We've come up with some DVDs that I think you're really going to enjoy. And in the interest of full disclosure, the proceeds from this DVD are divided 3 ways equally between the Eastern Snowmobile Racing Hall of Fame, Cranes Snowmobile Museum, and the Vintage Snowmobile Podcast. So if you enjoy any or all of those things, this is a wonderful way to support us, and we believe it's a good way to give value to the people who want to support it. Now, what is it exactly? We've unearthed a time capsule. We've created a Eastern Snowmobile Racing time capsule DVD. There's over 2 hours of vintage snowmobile programming on there. $15 plus $5 will get it out to you. $20. There's an address on the screen right now. We're doing checks or money orders, but we're working on being able to take a credit card. And what this is Midge found some footage, 8mm footage his cousin had from 1971 in Lancaster and 1973 in Malone, New York. And we worked together to put that together into a presentation. And we paused the video at various points to talk about people that we recognize, and memories and facts and history around racing and any of these people. And I'll give you an example. Burt Morin is in there. He is the gentleman who transported the first Ski-Doo across the border from Valcourt into the USA down to Lancaster. And we talked about him for quite a few minutes in that video. So there's plenty of that kind of history all throughout this video. We go on like that for over 2 hours, just pausing the video and doing slow-mos for interesting parts, with races and accidents and people that we recognize, to talk about them and their significance and what they contributed to the race, either the organization of the race or as a racer. And we go on for 2 hours like that with all sorts of history and detail and commentary and memories of just the golden age of snowmobiles. Anything I've missed about that DVD?
When you hit upon Burt Morin, he was the truck driver that Paul Crane, because Paul Crane was the first employee that Bob Bottoms hired at Timberland Machines in he hired him as a salesman. And so they needed a truck to go up and get parts and things, Bombardier, because they sold the J5 and the Muskeg, the little track vehicles that people, they were trying to sell for logging operations. So Paul knew of Morin Trucking. So he called Bert and asked something he could do. Bert says, sure. So they sent one day to pick up J5 and Muskeg parts and things like that for the shop. And also, he picked up a small wooden crate. And in that little wooden crate was a 1960 Bombardier. And he crossed the border with the very first Bombardier Skidoo to come down into the United States on December 4th, 1959. And Bert Morin was driving that truck. And he's in this DVD.
Yes.
And you and I talked about whether Bert ever thought of that being him being us. Like I said before, Paul Crane he was the first American to drive one. And he didn't really think much about that either. So I tell you, I don't think Bert did either. The person until later on, much later on. Now Bert did find out how special that was, but many years later. Yeah.
And I think the more years that pass, the more years that pass, the more special that becomes too, I believe.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, think about it. What people can, this discussion what the best snowmobile was, people are out of Cat people, Yamaha people, Polaris people, there were Rupp people, there were Snow people, and, there were Chaparral people all up through the years. Wonderful sleds, but what did they all have in common? They were copied on that little Bombardier design. You sat on a seat. There was a one-piece chassis, not a two-piece chassis with engine in the rear like the first out of Cats and Polarises. Not like that. It was a one-piece chassis. You sat on a seat over the track. Your feet were planted on two running boards. The engine was in front of the driver. The driver held onto handlebars, not a steering wheel, onto handlebars, and he steered two skis. You can put long travel systems on these new sleds all day long. You can put 150 horsepower engines on them. But they are built just like that little 1959 Bombardier Skidoo. J. Armand Bombardier was an absolute genius. He really was.
60, almost 70 years later.
Made today.
And it's that same format.
70 years later, that design. You can't beat that design.
No. It's been refined like you wouldn't believe, but it's still the same basic foundation.
You could refine it.
Yeah.
But you're sitting on a track over the seat, you're sitting on a seat over the track. Your feet are on running boards.
Sure.
You're not sitting in a cab in front with a steering wheel with the engine in back. That didn't cut it.
No.
You don't see them on the racetrack.
You're right. And they've experimented with other formats over the years, but they've never caught on or they've all kind of fizzled out.
Yeah.
Where this is the only one that's maintained consistently through the decades. Yeah, the Manta, exactly. And the Elite, the Ski-Doo Elite. Nice sleds, but they didn't last. They didn't stand the test of time.
No.
And then we've got some comments coming in.
You can't use body English. You can't use body English with people love to be able to control a sled. They love to swap their weight back and forth, and they like to put sleds in deep snow. You can you bank it and you make the turn, and you can't do that with any other design.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, that's what makes snowmobiling so fun is the body English. But we do have comments coming in. We've got Lombard, Floyd, and Lisa saying, yes, it would be wonderful to stay in one of those rooms. And I would love that as well. If we ever figure that out, I would love to stay in some of those rooms for sure. And then Alan
They're all brand new too, by the way.
Yes, it's all been refurbished. The whole motel has been restored. They've done an amazing job with it. But Alan Gove says he's got a 1970 Panther. They just put a 368 Sox in it. He found the machine sitting outside with 427 original miles, and it had a 399 Kohler. He also has a 71 Loudmouth Hood Puma in mint condition. Very cool. We'd love to see images of those at some point, Al.
Very cool.
Especially as we get the podcast going here next month. And Alan says he's interested in getting that video, and we thank you for that support, Al. In fact, they're in the description. There's the address of where to send a check for that video, and also we'll pop the graphic here in a moment. We've got one more comment. Great presentation for the Hall of Fame. And we thank you so much, everyone, for the kind words on that. And I'm going to pop the graphic one more time for that video. At the bottom of the screen, you'll see where to send the check or money order. We're working on being able to take credit cards and debit cards, but we're not quite there yet. We're working on it. But in the meantime, if you'd like to order one, just send a check or money order to the address on the screen there. And then we've also got a, a 6 DVD set that's going to contain all of the Eastern Snowmobile Racing Hall of Fame induction ceremonies, all 6 years, plus some bonus videos. This upcoming ceremony is the 6th annual induction ceremony. We're going to be videotaping that, editing that, putting that into a DVD, which will be included in that 6 DVD set. So it's going to take a little bit of time for that to be ready. My promise is to have that ready by Halloween and in the mail by Halloween. But that's something that's available to you also if you're interested in these Hall of Fame ceremonies. There are also interviews on these discs, as well as some bonus videos. So there's a lot of value there for the money. I know it's not cheap, $65, but you're getting a lot of content there. 6 DVDs. Each DVD has at least 2 hours worth of content on it. Some of them even more than that. So we want to create a lot of value when you're making a donation. And by the way, I've mentioned in the past, but I'll mention it again. The funds that are raised by doing this are split 3 ways. This is a fundraising effort for the Eastern Snowmobile Racing Hall of Fame, Cranes Snowmobile Museum, and the Vintage Snowmobile Podcast. So if you enjoy any or all of those things, this is a wonderful way to support those efforts and a way to receive a significant value in exchange for doing so.
Absolutely.
Anything to add to that, or anything I've missed?
I was just going to hit on the point. That museum is not a nonprofit entity. That's Paul Crane has to pay taxes on that every year. That's Paul's museum, and he filled it full of antique and vintage snowmobiles, mostly out of his own pocket. He had been privately collecting sleds over the last 50 years. And so, and he'd had them stored away. And then in 2010, he built that big, beautiful museum, 100 by 50 museum out of wood that he actually had. He bought an old sawmill up on his property to save money. And he actually cut the lumber that he built that building with on his own property from wood off his woodlot. So
you can see the building there in the graphic.
Is a Paul Crane effort.
Yes, and you can see the building there in the graphic.
It's a rustic board and batten style building. It's a very attractive building, really, for anything vintage. It's the building itself is vintage. It's not a brick and mortar building. It's something that Paul Crane actually built with his own wood, with his own hands.
Yeah.
So it's and it's a labor of love for Paul, and so
I think it's 50 by 100 feet.
Yeah, 50 by 100 feet.
There's over 100 sleds
it only
in there.
costs $5 a head. Yeah, $5 a person is cheap money for today. The way everything's gone up. So, to help pay the taxes, some of these DVDs and every little thing that we can do for him is really worthwhile to keep the place open.
Yes. Yeah. So these donations go to a very worthy cause. If you enjoy any of these things that you see. I know if you watch any of my videos, you're very familiar with the Hall of Fame and with Cranes Snowmobile Museum. We've collaborated a great deal over the years, and if you watch my videos with any regularity, you've seen a lot of that, and it supports everything that we just talked about. And we thank you in advance for that support. We do very much appreciate that. It helps to offset the cost for the Hall of Fame and for the Vintage Snowmobile podcast. I do that out of pocket. It's not cheap to do that, but it's a labor of love. I enjoy doing it, and I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't ever not do it, you know. But it's nice to get a few dollars coming in to help offset those expenses.
Right.
Yeah. Well, cool. I think. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it for the evening. We can you believe an hour has flown by so quickly? It's been a wonderful time having this conversation, and reminiscing about racing and talking about the Hall of Fame and about the DVD. And that was enormous fun making that time capsule DVD, that old 8mm footage.
It was
just rolling that by and talking about it and doing freeze frames, talking about the images that are being frozen there, and then doing slow-mos of some of the more exciting parts. And we do slow-mo so you can get a much closer look at whatever it is that's happening. We had a blast making it. And
we had a blast.
It's over 2 hours worth of material there. Go ahead. What were you going to say?
Yeah, and the only thing I can hit on this is Mike and I did this in 2 segments, about a week apart, and we did the Lancaster one, and then I think we did just the tail end of the Lancaster one, and then we went to the Malone, the 73 Malone World Series. And in that short time, I repeated the same thing again, I think, in the second segment of what we talked about in the first. So you're going to get everything. You're going to get all the information twice. You know, so this was never much good, even when it was new. So,
but the things that were repeated were good things.
I can remember what happened 50 years ago, but you know what happened 3 days ago.
Yeah, I hear that. Yeah, I'm not getting any younger either. Yeah. And I'll pop the graphic for that DVD one last time. This information is also in the description, so don't worry if this passes you by. Just pause this and look in the description, and you'll find the details about the DVDs and where to send the check or money order. And like I said, we're working on being able to take credit cards and debit cards, but we're not quite there yet. But for people who want to get started with this, there's a way to do it. Just check out the information there at the bottom of the screen as to where to send a check or money order. And let me change screens here. We've got a comment that's come in. Let's take a look. Oh, yes, good idea. Alan Gove says he suggests selling the DVDs at Cranes. And yeah, I'll be leaving some at Cranes.
We're going to have them at the induction.
Yes. And if you show up at the induction ceremony, you'll save yourself $5 shipping. It's just $15 at the ceremony. But if we have to ship it to you, of course, the Postal Service has to get their cut. You know, and because it's not cheap even to ship a DVD these days. But yeah, great advice, Alan. We appreciate that.
Everything's high.
But yeah, well, that's pretty much it. Thank you so much, Midge, for coming on. Appreciate your time. Very much looking forward to seeing you and everyone else on Saturday, and anyone who's within driving distance of Lancaster. I hope you'll join us in the ceremony. It's a wonderful, wonderful time. If you have wonderful memories of vintage snowmobiling and racing from back in the day, this is the event of the season. If you're in the East, it's worth the drive to get there. If you can't make it, we totally understand. We're going to be simulcasting the event on a podcast to 8 different places on Facebook and YouTube. So wherever you're viewing this now, tune in at 1:30 p.m. Saturday, 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time, Saturday, wherever you're viewing this now, and we'll be there waiting for you with that ceremony, so you can view it live and in real time. And we've got 2 more comments here. Go ahead.
Yeah, we basically do that around 1 or 1:30, just so people can grab a lunch before they come down. But if you want to come down at 10 or 11, we're going to be there. So, and a lot of other people also.
There's plenty to see. Yeah. And so Alan Gove is asking about the dates. I think he's asking about the Hall of Fame ceremony. That's this Saturday, the 10th, 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time, Lancaster, New Hampshire. And we've got another one saying he'll take a DVD for sure. We very much appreciate you doing that. yeah, we seriously appreciate that you guys are willing to buy these DVDs. It helps to support all of the causes that we mentioned. And like I said, for your donation, we're providing some value to you in the way of some great memories. It's a great time capsule of those wonderful days. And the information is in the description, and it's I'll pop that graphic one more time. This is where you're going to send a check or money order. Right there at the bottom of the screen is where you're sending that. And we thank you so much for supporting us. We've got another comment coming in. Let's take a look. Oh, Alan Gove says he's hoping to be there. Well, we hope you're there, Al. And if you do show up, be sure and approach each of us and say hello. We would love to meet you.
Yes.
Cool deal. All right. Well, with that, we'll call it a night. Thank you, everyone. And we hope to catch you Saturday, either in person or on the podcast. All righty. Have a good one, everyone.
Good night.